All right, so welcome everyone. Today we're talking FASEA, passing FASEA exams, and the story behind putting together a business to make sure that advisors not only understand their obligations, but know how to get through this exam and this hiccup along the journey of the evolution of financial advice in Australia. So we've got a dynamic duo joining us today, so Roger and Brook Patterson. And it's kind of a bit of an interesting story as I make my intro, because I actually started out in my very first financial advice role with Brooke going back about 23 years ago now. So in that time, Brooke has been working as a practicing advisor. She's also been working in and around managing teams of advisors, both within small firms and large corporates as well. So her background in that area is phenomenal. She's also sat the FASEA exam already, so I think most of you are going to find that pretty interesting. I'm getting asked questions all of the time about doing these exams. It's obviously on a lot of people's minds at the moment. And so I thought it'd be worthwhile getting these guys in. So Roger actually comes from a different side of the fence, and that's the legal profession. So Roger, in coming up with the intro, you've done a lot of things. So you've been a tutor, you've taught law, you've been a practicing lawyer, you've worked in a law firm helping, something like 400 lawyers around their study, their ethics, their own qualifications and exam process. So you've been helping people understand their legal obligations when it comes to professional licensing and practicing for a long time, both in Australia and in Asia. So you were based in Hong Kong for that. So I made sure I got that part right this time. So welcome, guys. And I'm really looking forward to getting into talking about this story, but also helping to perhaps answer a few people's questions about what this FASEA exam is and what they might need to do in order to get through the process of, one, studying, but also passing. And I think there's a bit they might need to understand in that. So welcome.
Thanks, Baz. Lovely to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure. Now, before we jump into it, if anyone wants to check out their website with any details about any of the stuff we talk about today, go to bluepath.com.au. That is the name of the business that they've created to support you guys in passing your FASEA exams. So I'm going to jump into it and just throw to you, well, why start a business helping financial advisors? I mean, obviously when I do the intro, it kind of sounds slightly obvious, but let's talk about it. So why do you want to do this? Why do you want to help them in the first place?
Well, for me, as you mentioned, Baz, I've been doing this work for a while, and I have a great affinity for financial advisors. I kind of love who we are as people. Most financial advisors are really good. They really care for their clients. And I'm actually personally excited about this opportunity for us as really to become a fully fledged profession. And I'm aware that there are a lot of advisors who have been doing great work for their clients for 10, 20 plus years and may not have sat an exam for a while. And it's one of the standards, it's one of the standards in the Code of Ethics that you will take on really upholding not only yourself, but your peers and taking us as a profession further. So I suppose I've really taken that standard to heart. And it was really interesting because, yes, I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of study at postgrad level. But when it came to me preparing for my exam, I went to Roger, because Roger's actually, he's taught a lot of people in ethics law, and he's taught a lot of people about how to complete through, a lot of lawyers on how to meet their code of ethics. So it was actually really, really helpful. And then we went, hang on, there's something that kind of works here. And the timing was kind of right for us. And we thought, let's just do this. I kind of
want to jump in there for a second, unpack a couple of things that you just talked about. Sorry, Brooke, I didn't mean to cut you off. So one thing you said, which I really related to, was advisors. Why help advisors? Well, I kind of like them, and I'm kind of happy with who we are as people. I really related to that. I sold my financial planning firm December 2010, and I kind of thought, that's it. I don't have to have anything to do with these advisors anymore. And then I've done nothing but hang out with them ever since and build a massive number of connections. And I don't know how many meetings I've had in that period of time with advisors. But to me, I think I agree with you completely. And that is that almost all of the ones that I know are good people. They want to make a difference in their clients' lives. And they not just want to, they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's got lost. I think it's got lost, perhaps at the regulator level. It certainly got lost in the press.
Mm.
But I also think it's got lost at the advisor level. I think they've really, in some ways, misunderstood how much value they actually provide to their clients.
Mm.
And so, sure, we're going through changes and this drive for professionalism. Whether you agree with the mechanism for that or not, it's following the standard that, in a lot of ways, has been set by the legal profession. So, what we're experiencing now with FASEA has a precedent, right? This is something that's taken place not just in financial advice, but in other professions throughout the world. And I think what you said there is really interesting. Who did you go to? Well, you went to Roger because he's a lawyer that's been used to this framework. Now, that leads us to the start point. And I want to make it early on in our chat because, I've had the chance to speak to clients and other friends of mine who have been through the FASEA exam, and Brooke, you have now as well. And I think one of the things that's universally clear in talking about this is that this exam is more of a legal exam, and it's testing you on your ability to apply the legislation to, real world situations. But it's not about the ethics inside. Like, it is about ethics, but it's not about the ethics in terms of you're a good advisor who knows how to do the right thing, who looks after people, who's got ethics in their heart and their mind. This is about the application of the law to particular scenarios. And the exam is seeking to identify whether you understand the law as it relates to those scenarios. And as you said, a lot of advisors haven't necessarily gone through. It's been, for me, it's been 26 years since I've been my business law subjects at university. So it's been a long time since I went through that. And I think that's something that we need to talk about. You might have been practicing for a long time. You might have looked after thousands of clients in that time with nothing like a complaint and really understand how to do an amazing job. But does that mean you know how to tie which bits with what piece of legislation? And I think that's an interesting thing that we should talk about as well. Now, I just wanted to bring that out up front. And obviously we'll talk about how you might go about studying for that. And really, when we get down to it, that's why I've asked Brooke and Roger to be here, so that we can help you understand what this exam is about, what you need to know in order to prepare for it, and perhaps how to deal with it. And this is something we didn't talk in our preparation beforehand, but how to deal with this a bit psychologically as well. And I think this is something that people have been underestimating, is change is painful, and the unknown is also stressful. So when you've got this exam hanging over your head, and that's just on top of all of the other change. I did a video not so long ago which has had, thousands upon thousands of views, which is that, are we seeing a wave of depressed financial advisors? So with all of this change and uncertainty comes pressure and tension. So I think I wouldn't mind unpacking with you guys a little bit about, well, how do you break it down mentally so that you're able to deal with this from a psychological and stress point of view? So that's my intro, well and truly done. So Roger, before we kind of get into any of those things, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, well, I was a lawyer. I was a commercial lawyer, worked mainly in construction disputes. I ended up in Hong Kong, where there was a construction boom, doing a lot of construction law work there. Then in my law firm, I kind of joined the law firm as the manager that was responsible for ethical compliance of lawyers, roughly 400 lawyers, and complying with standards globally and locally. And I did training for the lawyers there, a lot of face-to-face training. And then on coming to Australia, worked as an ethics solicitor with the Law Society here, and I've been teaching law at Bond University. So really interested to see, it's been a journey for me learning about legal ethics, because they didn't really teach you too much of it when I was a law student. You kind of learned it as you went. And they've since put in exams that you have to do. And it's interesting seeing how the financial advisory has followed the profession of law on that. The rules for lawyers have built up over the history of the common law, literally hundreds of years. So you guys in the financial advisory world, in the space of about 20 years, becoming a profession, and all of that's been applied to you. So it's a real challenge for you. It's just like, every professional, it seems to me, if you're a doctor, if you're an engineer or an architect, you have to become a bit of a legal specialist on your areas of liability and compliance, right? And you guys are going to have to do that too.
So, yeah, it's kind of interesting that I like that. You have to become a specialist in the law as it relates to what you do. And now, whether this is a good or a bad thing, I think there's plenty of both in that. So why then teaching people about application of the law? What is it about that drives you, Roger? I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I really like the training development scenario. I like helping people. I like learning myself, and so it's very rewarding on that. I just like learning and development, and I've been sort of drawn to that in the last 20 years. Actually, Brooke and I met through a course.
And then we got engaged in another one. I was in a training course in San Francisco. Roger was in Hong Kong at the time, so it was a phone call, offer of marriage. But
by the way,
okay. Yeah, well, there's debate about that, but
I love it. That's awesome.
It wasn't recorded.
No, that's a good story. I think that's awesome. So yeah, obviously the important things in your life happen in training sessions there. So look, I can relate to a few of the things that you've said there. So, I've always enjoyed the law. I think they were my favorite subjects at university. It was a toss-up between, investment analysis and the business law subjects that I was doing. And obviously you've still held a fascination for the law along with training people. So I'm going to ask you this, and I'll put you on the spot for it. What's the positive aspects of having a legal framework about ethics? And what's perhaps some of the negative aspects that you see about how it relates directly to the law? And does that actually make the profession better, or does it just make it more compliant?
Yeah, so, well, I think you have 3 questions, right? The first one. So
yeah, I kind of ended up with 3, so good work.
Well, I think when you're learning the subject, a little bit of history goes a long way. You just reading the Corporations Act cold is mind-numbing, and you don't have the context. It's really hard to follow it. But if you read a bit of the history, then you can see, how this makes sense. And there's been a development, which I think you mentioned earlier, of what's been required. And I think this is what the Royal Commission, former Justice Hayne has said. One of the key recommendations of the Royal Commission report was to simplify the law and to make it easier to comply. So actually having this code of ethics, I think the idea is that ultimately it simplifies things. rather
prescribed.
rather than going to section 961J, subparagraph 5, and looking there. These things really are decided on principle. Has this person been honest? Were they completely honest with you? Are they making a commission that hasn't been disclosed to you? These are really quite simple things, really. So I think they've gone the really detailed way, and now they're trying to simplify it. So I think that's going to help. I think it's going to make it easier. I think it's easier when you have that 100% one way or the other. It's going to provide clarity for people rather than, hey, get someone to look up, the Corporations Act to see whether we can do that. It's slowing things down, clearly, having to go through all those procedures. So I think it's going to be a good thing to have this code of ethics.
Okay, so making things clearer and simpler. What's the downside then to following that framework, do you think?
Well, I don't think there's a downside, really. You're going to have a profession at the end of the day. You're probably going to have to work harder for your money. You're not going to be able to get it's already been ended, a lot of it on the commission side. So it's going to be harder. I think it's going to be harder for people to make a buck. And the lawyers have had it. The lawyers find it hard to make a buck now. They've got to comply. They've got to do all this disclosure to clients. So you think things are hard. There's not going to be any easy money in this world, in the industry. So that's my impression.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead.
I was just thinking on that. There's not going to be easy money, and that's a good thing. But I think some of the things that I've heard that you're doing, it's about it really creates a new opportunity for creating value for what you actually do. When I look back in the past, and so many times the real value that I added to clients, I didn't even, that part didn't actually get charged for, in a way. So I think we're going to shift. It's going to take people really possibly transforming their business models a bit, but we will shift to something that really works for advisors and clients more so than today.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with you, Brooke. And, we had a bit of a chat about this, and that's obviously something I'm really passionate about. I think what I agree with Roger is the way that advice has primarily been done, it will be much harder, and it's already harder, and it's getting harder, which is why there needs to be a disruption in that mechanism. And I've been saying this for a long time. It's just now the legislative bits have kind of caught up, and that's putting more pressure on. But there's market forces too. People don't want the same as what they were getting before. And as Brooke was alluding to, we're actually finding it really easy to find advice firms and then say to them, you don't need any new clients. We can double your revenue and have much happier clients. It's just what you're going to deliver is not in the same box that you were in before. And most of the changes have happened to this narrow regulated box. And so in financial advice, it's, the portfolio management, the insurances, the goal setting, but only in a kind of small avenue of how it relates to investing money, doing some retirement savings, maybe doing some planning, etc. Anything outside of that, advisors have typically helped clients with to a quite significant degree, but they've never made it the value proposition, and they've not been paid for it, and they've not really understood how to articulate it as value. Yet it is the most valuable bit, and the advisors that evolved to understand that, it's night and day in terms of where their businesses are. But that doesn't mean that you can ignore the bits in the box, right? So you still have to figure out how to do these things compliantly, and you have to live in the ecosystem that exists at the moment. And as I said, there's a lot of shell shock out there with the changes that are going on, because, it's not just there's a ethics exam now. There's your commissions are getting cut off that you had before. And that might sound okay, but what if you just spent $2 million buying a book of business from someone retiring, and you borrowed all of that money, and your plan was to convert all of the commission to fees, and you're only, a quarter of the way through that process, and then you're looking at losing that revenue. And there's lots of that's out there. You've got people that have been practicing for, as Brooke said, 30 years. And then all of a sudden they're being told that, their qualifications don't stack up. And that goes beyond FASEA. That's, them being told they might have to go back and do another degree and all of these other things.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I do think there's still space for us to, I'm reluctant to say this, but I do think there's space for us to lobby and advocate for people on that capacity. But, we'll get to that. This part needs to happen.
That is tough, what you described as. That's tough. And you're in the industry, and all I could say is lawyers have gone through the same thing. Other professions have gone through the same thing. So that there's no escaping this. And I think the lobbying days are over. This door is closing, and they're going to close it. So you've got to adapt, right? So
I think plan A has to be that you adapt yourself. And I think one of the downsides for financial advice that maybe, because we work with financial advisors, accountants, and lawyers as well. That's kind of the three professions that we tend to work with and help in their businesses. And one of the things about financial advisors is they've almost had this parental relationship with two groups. One, the licensee, and the second is the product providers. So they've always been kind of, no, it's okay, we'll look after you. And there's been a real, I'm going to use the word, it's kind of almost like a handout mentality. The dealer group will save us, the product manufacturers will provide us with things. And so I guess in a robust business standpoint, they're used to being looked after to a degree. But there's a reason that was the case, because they were being used as distribution arms and whatever. And I think the key message is that you've got to change your business. You've got to save yourself, and you shouldn't be looking to your licensee or to product providers to do that anymore. And to a degree, I think it's made the shell shock a little bit worse to find for so many of them that ultimately they're on their own. Whereas, an accounting firm, sure, they had whether they were a CPA or chartered accountant or whatever, but there was never that same, degree of feeling protected. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of talking about this shell shock that's out there. And I think if you're coming into the FASEA exam with all of this background noise around you and you haven't studied for ages, it can be really stressful.
It can. And I think the first thing, when you have stress in your life in any aspect, the first thing that makes a real difference is being in action. So whilst you're thinking, oh my God, I've got to do that sometime, and I'll put it off, then the stress just continues. But when there is some action taken, no matter how small, how piecemeal, it does take that weight off. And I'd heard some people suggesting that you wait before you do this. And I was thinking, why would you wait? First of all, it's just going to be in the back of your head. We're doing workshops, and, we're clearly here with a business, but I think you're just engaging in that, committing to that, okay, well, that's done. Now I can park that to the side, I can continue. And then registering for that exam, and then knowing, okay, well, I'm there and I'm doing that. And for me, that was the start of all this, because I was feeling like that. I was thinking, I started, I'm going to do a little video perhaps with you, Baz, or I'll try it myself, on the stages of grief around FASEA, right? And you go from just this anger, it's like, well, I'm not one of the dodgy guys. And then you go through all these different processes. So just going through those different levels, and then, I mean, where I am at the moment,
Actually, I think that's really insightful. I'd like to talk through the stages of grief on that. I think that's, because it's true. It's what I'm seeing when I talk to people.
It's, and it is important. And, I do feel for my fellow, I do love people in this work. We know more about our clients than anyone else. We know more than the lawyers, than the doctors. We have the most intimate relationship with our clients. And 9 times out of 10, or more than 9 times out of 10, advisors take that. They take that as sacred. They value that. So I think it's time to just, kind of help out the advisors. And that other thing about kind of being all by your own, and I think something that really works about the workshop environment and being face to face is just connecting with the advisor at another firm. Okay, we're in this together, and you kind of collaborate together. And that actually comes through in the Code of Ethics, which I found really interesting. I hadn't really thought about it till I read it in the Code of Ethics, that we really kind of band together to build this up, and I love that. And I think that can be really quite freeing. You can get through those stages of grief to the good parts.
Yeah, I think it's, the first thing is, I'd say it's natural, and you're not alone. And so I'd add 2 points to what Brooke was saying about how you deal with this. First is, it's normal to feel that way, right? It's natural. Second thing is, you're not alone.
No.
Third thing is taking action like anything. This is why your clients come to you. It's why you as an advisor have such a transformative impact in your clients' lives, because what you give people is a sense of direction and then help them take action. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the core fundamental drivers of feeling good about your life, is moving forward and moving in a direction and knowing what that direction is. And so it was a really interesting point that you made, and I've spoken to hundreds of advisors personally about this. And yeah, it's either that I'm booked in, or I'm not worrying about that. That's too hard. I'm leaving it for later on.
That's right. And it's a much more freeing place to be. And we're really clear on what the intent of the workshop is. It's not to go in there and show how clever Roger is and how much, Corpse Act material and knowledge that he knows in a day. It is to make sure it's as concise as possible, that we get through it and really clear, give that overview, and make sure that people are left going, yep, got it, know what I need to do, I can do this, thanks very much.
So we'll jump into a bit of detail as we go about, how you're helping people to pass this exam in the workshops. But as we build up, there's a last point that I want to make on dealing with this action-wise. And that is, and this is probably the biggest criticism that I give to financial advisors and accountants for that matter, is you've got to actually walk your own talk. And what I mean by that is, get help. It's really hard to deal with your own crap yourself. Okay? You cannot be objective about your own financial situation or your own business. That's why financial advisors and accountants are so critical in their clients' lives. Because without someone to come in and take a step back and help you go, no, hang on a second, we can break this problem down. Here's how we get you there. Actually, you can probably retire tomorrow and you're stressing out about it. Let's break it right down, or whatever it is. You can't do that on your own. And advisors are probably the most guilty of anyone. It's the old plumber's pipes leaking, of actually going out and getting help from someone externally. And I think that's my key bit of advice, and why I wanted to invite you guys along, because first of all, I'm like, it's aligned. You've got a great solution. The two ideal people to come together to create something like this. And so it gives me another chance to, look advisors in the eye, right, and say, hey, get some help with this. You don't have to do it on your own.
And it's not like, sorry, Baz, but
No, go ahead.
We have it doesn't, you being a really good advisor is not related to needing assistance to complete the FASEA exam. They are two entirely separate things. So if there's a concern, I should know this, no. First of all, this is new. This is new legislation. So just in case there's that separation that, I should really kind of get there on my own because I'm good. It doesn't need to be that.
Well, yeah, it's not an admission of weakness at all to get advice. It means you actually believe in what you do. And the thing is, if you don't pay other people to get help to give you advice, then do you actually believe in what you do? And I'm going to point this out because I've met with thousands of advisors. I mean, going through their business models, and I've had so many in-depth discussions, and we've had lots of clients over the years. And universally, I can line up and go, you want to know one of the main characteristics, if you look at the most successful firms compared to the ones that kind of get stuck, if I looked at one characteristics that I see is this group consistently goes out and gets help from other people and they pay for it. Now, that's not a plug for the social advisor, but I mean, they've had coaches.
It makes so much sense. You pay for professional advice in different aspects. I mean, I rate myself on knowing tax planning and stuff as a financial planner. Our accountant brings so much value to us. So yeah, you do. You go out and you use other people.
So let's talk a little bit about the exam and what it kind of is. Like, what are they actually testing, Roger? What do they really want to know out of this? And for someone who hasn't gone and done study for a very long period of time, that's been used to practicing in front of clients, then what is this exam about? What are they looking for and what are they testing you on?
Yeah, well, there's 3 knowledge areas that FASEA has set out. And there's the legal and regulatory, and then there's the ethics side, and then there's
the actual
construction and advice. So they're looking for you to apply the laws. So you need to know what the laws are and then apply those to situations. Most of the questions, not all of them, are there's some scenario. So you need to identify what the issue is, what they're driving at, and then apply the law. It's open book, but you don't want to be relying on trying to find something in the exam. But you can go and find you can check something. And then you apply the law and you reach a conclusion. I can do this, or I've got to do something else. So that's practice, and just tying in with what you guys are saying about getting help. Observing my own days of studying law, and you guys would have been the same doing your own studies. The people who form their own study groups, who go and see the tutor, go and see the professor. They do really well. It's not necessarily the brightest, right? Tutoring law, I have my day where I'm available, and some students will come and see you, and most don't. They don't go to see you. They just cram at the end and just get past. And the people who come and see you, the proactive ones, they're not necessarily the brightest, but they get better marks in the end. So it's about practicing and doing that, and
that's why
talking with other people and going to see the professor.
Yeah. So Roger said when we're building our workshops, and turn Siri's listening to us, that it was really important that we offered kind of tutoring just before the exam. So it's like, okay, we do the workshops for people and then make sure that we're available, because that's just how Roger's done it before. He says it's important, we need to do it that way. So that's what we're doing.
Okay, that's kind of interesting, and I'm not sure I should admit this, but she's giving me a flashback to my own university days. So one thing I wasn't really that into was putting together all the background research. And back then when you went through university, they didn't give you copies of study notes or whatever. You had to go to the lectures and get the notes and put them together, and I just couldn't do that. I needed it to be summarized, and I'm just thinking, well, this is kind of bringing me full circle. So by the same token, I've always been good at solving any problem. So I, in university, operated a favor trading enterprise. So my office was the photocopy room. So whatever anyone needed to do at university, especially swap back, they could come and see me and I helped them solve it. So what I would do was solve the problems of the good students and get their notes. And so that way I could just come together, and instead of trying to go through all of the lectures and all of the material, I'd be able to study the best notes. And in essence, I think that's what you guys have done. You've brought, you're the best students, if you like, that have then brought all the notes together and then given a framework. So all I needed to do was turn up and spend 2 days with a couple of the best students and go through all of that, and whatever they needed, whether it was to get a job or sell their car or...
Baz, that's so you. That's so good.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And so I'd just spend 2 days with the best students, and then I'd be good to go and pass my exam. So yeah, there you go. I haven't shared that story publicly. Now it's out there in the open.
Love that.
I was going to try and hold on to that till after my kids had gone through uni, but it's too...
Oh, they'll see it now.
Yeah, I passed company law because a student flat burnt down.
Okay.
The top students' notes became available to some people who had lost their notes in the fire that burnt their flat. And I knew those people whose flat burned down, and they got these fantastic notes, and I got a copy of them because I was friends with them. And that's how I got past the exam.
Yeah, look, I worked out...
I'll tell you what, it takes you 2 hours just to download the documents that FASEA provide before you...
Well, let's dig into that. So there's the 3 areas, right? So let's just cover those again. The 3 areas that's covering is the ethics,
the regulatory, and the advice construction.
And then if you're going to do this on your own, what do they suggest you do? So we talked about a bit about this before. So first of all, yes, our NBN isn't exactly what we expected the NBN might be. So it takes a while to download this stuff, right?
Yeah, well, FASEA haven't made it that easy. They give you reading. They've got an exam guide. You get the exam guide, and the first reading is Corporations Act.
Just a minute.
There you go.
Volumes of the Corporations Act, and volumes 4 and 5, which is I think total 900 pages, what they're prescribed reading.
That's the first line. Yes.
So actually, when you look at it, you realise why they put that there. They couldn't not put it there, but you can't just read the Corporations Act. So
yeah, who's got time for that?
And quite honestly, if you just sat there and read every page of it, I'm not sure whether it would really be that helpful in getting engaged in interpreting that and relating that to case studies, which is how they question you in the exam.
Yeah.
So actually, Brooke, if you wouldn't mind diving into that. So you've sat the exam.
Yes.
So what's it like?
You know what? I was surprised in that I think it's a great exam. I think they have done so well. I was wondering, because I thought, geez, how are they going to get this? And after that mad aged care question, where we went, right, okay, this is rather specialist and not really testing what you want to test. So first thing is, I think it's a good exam. I think they are actually testing and measuring what they want to test and measure. It was majority of the questions were case study questions. And the multiple choice were designed in such a way that you cannot wing those multiple choice. So it was, kind of like a 2 or 3 part question of a multiple choice. You need to get, A, B, C here, dun here, or da, and then you get the 1 mark at the end for that. So I think it's been very well designed. And my understanding as well is you sit in the exam room, and the person sitting next to you is actually doing a completely different test to you. So they have, I don't know how many questions, 300 questions or whatever, and then they just mix them up. So we're all getting tested on the same things, but you're not all doing the same questions.
There's no one exam, and then they're just going to keep updating it. So
the other thing which Roger alluded to before, so you have the open book, but the open book is the 900 pages of the Corporations Act. So plus. I completed the exam without going to the open book. And then I went back and I noted my comments, and then I went and referred back to the open book for the ones that I would recommend that people do it that way, because otherwise you're just going to lose all your time unless you have got adept in really connecting and relating to those documents. I think it's possible. It probably is the best way to go, almost to relate to it as if it's not open book, because that can really throw people, particularly if they haven't done an open book exam before or for a while. It can actually give you a false sense of confidence. You'd probably actually answer the questions better just sitting them and doing them.
So what does open book mean? Does that mean you can take in your own notes?
No, you can't take in anything, but they have a drop down where you have a drop down. So, okay, this is Corps Act. This is you've got.
You can't just surf the internet for things.
No.
They've got a limited number. They've got legislation. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just get this clear, right? So you're in the exam and you're saying there's a computer you can access.
That's right. So you got the computer. You're doing it all on the computer. It's computer based.
Okay, there you go.
So that's the other thing too. So
that's a good thing to know, because I remember when I did open book exams, you had a book with all the tabs on it that you'd marked out and whatever. You could take a specific book. And then
and that would be valuable. See, in that kind of open book, it's something that you've really worked on that book and you bring it in. No, it's not like
limited.
that.
It's called limited open book.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is, it's rigorous, and so it should be. It's rigorous exam rules, and so you're given a piece of scratch paper, which is, for me, is very, very important, that I can just scribble down while I'm thinking. But it's got your name on it. It's got your code on it. You have to hand that back in at the end. It was all, no mucking about. The other thing about the exam is the register time is something like an hour before the exam. So just check on that, because I kind of knew that, and I was ready to just go and sit there and prepare. I was coming from the coast, but a lot of people are there and just, I've got to sit. And once you've registered, you're not allowed to go out again. You can't just go out and get a coffee. You have to sit in that room. So just being clear like that, things like that, just so that you feel relaxed when you go into the exam, that stuff. It's kind of
okay. So you're sitting down, you're answering the questions on a computer.
Yes.
And they've got a drop down with tabs.
Mm-hmm.
So you would need to familiarize yourself, not just with the legislation, but then figure out how it relates to the tabs, because you could kind of get used to, if you had the business law book that had Corporations Act in it, you could get used to where sections were, but you can't do that. So you can't prep that. You would literally have to find it in the drop.
You can search it. You can search it, but I think, I've done the exam, and I think you're better off almost just blanking out that it's an open book.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
And then, okay, I've got 20 minutes at the end or however long. And that was the other thing. I didn't have any sense of urgency of time. I think it's a reasonable length of time for you to...
So how long is the exam?
3.5 hours, I think. 3.25 hours. So...
you have 15 minutes reading, and then it's 3-hour exam.
Right, okay, there you are. I said I can't remember how long it was, but I had ample time at the end. But I felt pretty confident about all the questions and answers. But I think for, if you're consistent and you just go through those, time should not be a factor. I was aware of it, so I was just checking, okay, I'm halfway through, what's the time, and just, just those kind of exam things that you do. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're preparing for this on your own, you've got a 3-hour exam.
Mm-hmm.
There's about 2,000 pages worth of suggested reading that they give you if you're prepping on your own.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself would be very difficult to synthesize. So if you're doing it on your own, you need to allow a lot of time to go through that and synthesize and then practice your synthesis on case studies, etc. So yeah, that sounds like a lot of work. I think at this stage I'm trying to figure out how to get the star students to coach me for a day. The good news is I don't have to offer them any deals. In this case, I'd just be saying, hey, can I come to a workshop? So let's talk about how you guys have offered a solution to people. And I kind of wanted to dig into the story behind it and get your take on the exam itself and what it's doing. But let's talk about what you've done. So how did you go about creating a solution? So before we get into, the workshops and how people can get your help on this, so when you were approaching the exam, how did you break it down? Roger, you've obviously got a hell of a lot of experience in, doing this exact thing. So how did you help Brooke break it down in the first place?
Well, fortunately, FASEA have provided a curriculum, so it's fairly well bounded, and they have set out learning outcomes for each of those 3 knowledge areas. So you want to read those. Of course, they're quite general. So they say things like apply the Corporations Act to scenarios which may arise. So it's pretty general. What we've done is get what the Corporations Act is saying, the Chapter 7, and then we're condensing it down into the key areas. And for each key area, we will have a scenario, and then you want to discuss it. One thing you learn when you're learning law is that just learning what a legal principle or provision says doesn't stick, right? You might understand it, but then when the next one comes along, it just wipes out the previous one, and you don't really grasp these things until you have an example. So it's very important to have that formulation of learning what this provision says, that you're required to do A, B, and C. And then, so for example, if you are an authorised representative, then you need to do this, this, and this. And then if there's an exam practice question, then apply that as well. So, and then it's very much you need to not spend too much time lecturing to people, but you need some of that, and you need some reading, and you need interaction, and you need applying it to the problems, and you need to practice it. So there is that constant backwards and forth. So that's what we've designed. We thought one day, you could do it in a day. That's a reasonable time. Yeah. Probably with some preparation, but
doesn't mean that you
could do it then.
You don't have to go home and do some study, but you can get complete on all learning outcomes of FASEA, in that day, and be clear.
Okay, so we'll get to your one-day workshop in a little bit, because I wanted you to break that down as well. But I'm kind of getting the history behind it. I like the nuance and the story to things. So Brooke, what's your side of how Roger got you through the study path? Like, how did he break it down for you?
Well, it's interesting because, married to my darling geeky husband, and I think of lawyers as kind of a very technical person, but the first thing Roger wanted to do is say, okay, well, let's just get back to the story. Let's just get back to the story and let's read the stories. And that's just it just makes it so much easier. I actually have really I've loved studying this, and but connecting to every part of that legislation and relating to it as a story and relating to it to how does it, how do you apply that? That's the part that's kind of made sense. And it's been really interesting is because, yes, Roger's trained as an ethics lawyer teacher, but there's aspects of this that are new to him, which is why, it works for the two of us to do it together. So it's kind of been that combining of querying things from both sides that really works, which is, what do you call that? No, that wasn't. No, but
synergy,
ontological way or Socratic way of thinking, right? Where it is a Socratic style workshop where you're looking at something and then you're going back and forth to identify that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to jump into something because I think you said something which could be really easy to gloss over and not focus on. I think we should. And this is why I was asking you. Now, don't talk to me about the workshop yet. Let's talk about how you got Brooke there, because I think this is going to help people conceptualize for themselves. And what you said was you really enjoyed this. So what did Roger help you do? I think what he helped you do is to move past the stages of grief, if you like, to let go of.
We're all about this actually being something that people totally love doing this, that it really lifts you to a next place. And I found myself strangely left with kind of a weirder, greater sense of pride in the work that I do. And so that's
No, I think that's really, really good input, because I want to say to people out there, yeah, change can be frustrating. And if you take into account the feelings of, criticism and distraction and, all of this stuff that's happened, and set that aside and go, you know what, this is a chance for you to actually experiment and do something cool, and look at it that way rather than this burden of I've got to pass this exam, it's a 3-hour exam, and all of this kind of stuff, and instead take it as an experience and a journey and something that's positive. If you start with that, I promise learning anything is always easier from that framework. Yeah. And doing it in a positive way, not doing it on your own so that it can be overwhelming, and having a clear set of steps to work through. I think that's really important. And it's why I wanted to, chat to you guys today, because you've then moved that into something else, and we can get into a little bit of detail here. And so your solution is spend a day, come and do a workshop with us. Okay. And we'll break it down.
We looked at what do we think is the way that serves people best. And this is what we think works, just because of the type of material and the fact that there is so much around interpretation. Every single question is not, do you know this fact? It is interpretation. So we thought that engagement side was very important.
It's no accident this is how law is taught at law school.
Yeah.
I think there's a knack to that interpretation as well. And that's not something that most people are going to have frequent, or I should say recent, experience with. And I remember going through, university, and it's, I've done postgrads and undergrads and bachelor degrees and whatever. But you kind of, after the first year, you get into a zone. You know how they're testing you. You know what they're asking for. But man, that's, for me, at least a long time ago. And I think for a lot of people who are doing this exam, that's the case too. So
I think that's right. And then having seen older adult students who have learned to discipline, nurses, business people, real estate people who were studying law in some of my courses, they found it difficult to adjust their thinking because they were trained in a certain discipline, whereas the kids straight out of school are used to doing it, and this is just another subject and they're well practiced in it. So there is that hump to get over. Yeah.
So tell us about what you've created with Blue Path, right? And I like the name too, by the way. I think that's pretty cool. I mean, it kind of sums up what I was saying before, which is treat this as a pathway to something that's actually positive, and it doesn't have to be difficult. So you're running workshops, and you think that you can help people to get their head around all of this stuff in a day. Now, as you said, that doesn't mean not checking in and maybe getting some, help closer to the exam, or they're not going to maybe need to practice afterwards. But the core elements of knowing how to pass this exam, you've kind of brought together in a one-day workshop. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? What do you cover with people during that day?
Well, the main thing as Roger mentioned, is there's specific learning outcomes. And I was hoping before going into the exam, and it proved right, that if I know that I am aware and know how to fulfill on those learning outcomes, then I can do the exam. So I'm very grateful to FASEA that they have given us that specific guideline. Okay, the reading has to be broad that they provide us, but they have given us a clear curriculum. So we really just jump through those things. And Roger has he's been training people for a long time, and certainly in professional and lawyer environments, in law firms as much as students. And so, he has these little approaches like his app where we all connect and work out case studies together, and so everybody can work out, everybody can answer without actually having to put up their hand and say, oh, this is mine, and feel, so everybody can connect and answer those questions. Yeah. And the other thing we thought was important, so if you see on the website, we're in Brisbane, we're in Adelaide, we're in Tasmania, as well as Sydney and Melbourne, and we want to make sure that this comes to regional, because everyone who's in regional areas has to, it's not that easy for them to do the exam, and we feel for those guys as well. So we do intend to do Townsville, and if there's people in those areas, they can just reach out to us and say, hey, come to my town and do a workshop. And because I just, I think that's important. Financial advisors are financial advisors everywhere, not just in Sydney and Melbourne.
Okay, so if you look at the website, you can go to bluepaths.com.au. Bluepath, there we go. Bluepath.com.au, not with an S. And if you scroll down the page, you'll see a list of current workshop dates. Now, I believe that you're scheduling those to match with FASEA exam sittings, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. So we've set the first and the last one in what we think is a reasonable time frame. So it's not too far out from the exam and it's not too close to the exam. So what you see is the next set of workshops before the next exam, and then we will do it again for the December one. So we'll just set them up like that. Yeah.
I kind of like the idea of, look, and I definitely agree with Brooke, put something in motion so that it's not in the back of your mind. Whenever you're dealing with people in stressful situations, getting them to commit to things and taking it out of the subconscious worry and into action is always a better thing. So now I get it. There's firms I'm talking to now where, their licensee's been shut down and they've got to change licenses and whatever. All right, fair enough. Deal with that, deal with FASEA afterwards. But if you can, I think it's worthwhile tackling this issue and being proactive about it. And the more you can do that in your business life and your career life, the better ahead that you will be. So it's pretty simple. You can book your next sitting and then you can actually go, well, I've got help for this. Now, this blows my mind, so I'm going to ask you this. What does it cost to come and do a workshop so that you're taking all of the pain out of what I used to have to do deals with the best students for, right? That's essentially what you're doing. So what's it cost to come and do a day and get your help for this stuff?
$635.
Can you have a look and tell me my price, Baz?
It's $575. $575.
Undercut it. Yeah, it was.
We're talking, I think, well, you've got two prices. So one's early bird and then one's closer to the date, right? And both of those are under $800, which, by the way, I'm going to say, this is cheap. It's like, to me, it's like some of the best value you're ever going to get. And I'm not saying that because I've got these guys on. I got them on because I wanted to tell you that this, to me, is a no-brainer. And if I was sitting the FASEA exam, this is exactly what I would do. I would make sure that I've invested in getting the right help and support, doing it in a focused way, getting practice and some help around practicing. And I think that's really, really important. So And I like the mysteriousness about the exact price. I'm not going
Look,
to.
I'm so sorry, Baz. It's just
No. I'm actually not going to tell people because
oh,
the price is not
I can
an
search it and
obstacle.
find it right now. But do you want me to?
No, I want to keep it a mystery for people.
It can be like those infomercials where they say,
Yeah,
"Would you
yeah.
pay
And the
Oh,
price
$20
is going
this
up while
night?"
we're talking
This is
now.
an
That's why we don't want to.
Oh, it's less.
This is an example of why I need to
There's
go.
only 3
do
spots
Baz.
left, and the ticket price is going up.
I need to do. We need to do Baz Gardner coaching. We don't even know the price of our own.
No, look, honestly, that's pretty normal in the advice space, right? And that would be a key piece of advice for all of you. Look, honestly, I'll click on the register now so we can kind of close the loop on the joke. So here we go.
That it works.
Oh, look, it's actually making me choose registration, right?
Yay!
Then
Oh, Baz, you know you want to.
early bird, number of attendees. Let's go 1.
Shouldn't really give you a choice, right? It should
There
be
we go, $5.95 if you get in now.
Right.
That's right.
$5.95.
Not 600.
Otherwise, it's $6.25.
Yeah.
You know what? Absolutely insane the value you guys have put together for people. I think anyone tuning into this, you'd be nuts not to get the help. And I would suggest doing it now, because my advice to these guys is going to be next workshop, I think you should charge some more for this. Maybe you're undervaluing yourselves as well. So get in
the business coaching
for the pre-Baz early bird special. Look, thanks very much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully we've given people a chance to understand what FASEA is, how they can pass it, what the background of it is, maybe a bit of insight from someone who set the exam, and most importantly, how to get some help. All I know is this: for the price of a ticket to come along to this, you get the opportunity cost of doing it yourself is infinitely more expensive, and you need to value yourself as a professional. So get on and get some help, and looking forward to hearing the people at the other end saying, I've dusted this FASEA exam now. So thanks very much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Lovely. Thanks, Baz.
Take care, everyone.